Welcome to the Be Amazing podcast. On this show, we'll give you the fuel you need through motivational pep talks, the fitness tips to be your healthiest self, fortitude to push through the hardships, and focus you need to build the skills needed for the next level, no matter what that looks like to you. I'm your host, Cel Smart. I'm a wife, a mom, community leader, and fitness professional of over 18 years. I'm here to be your biggest cheerleader, advocate, and connector. Let's be amazing together. Hi everyone, it's Cel, and today my guest here on the Be Amazing podcast is Patrick Menefee. Welcome.
Thank you. Really glad to be here.
Yeah, so let's talk about who you are. But let me back up a little bit. Before we get to that, I was introduced to you by Brian LaFontaine. So shout out to Brian for the connection.
Love Brian.
Yeah.
Love you, Brian.
He's going to love this. But let's talk a little bit about who you are. Tell us, who is Patrick?
Depends who you ask. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. I am, first and foremost, father, husband. I have a beautiful wife and a 3.5-year-old daughter. And they're so much fun. So incredible. Right now, I think to start with the end in mind, I do a lot of work with business owners focused on mindset. And what I've found throughout my entire career of a bunch of different things that I've done, and I'll tell you in a second, but I have been on autopilot for a lot of it, where I would chase the thing that is what other people wanted, or what the business wanted, or what someone else expected of me. I would do what I was supposed to do rather than doing the thing that I really loved and wanted to do. And I would carve my own niche in them along the way, but I found that as I was doing that, and once I finally woke up to it over the past couple of years, that a lot of other people are too. Especially business owners. And so I do a lot of work now in both the community space. I do a little bit of one-on-one work, but working with business owners to help them get off of autopilot and make better decisions for themselves that are more authentic, more focused on how they can build the life that they want. And so for me, that started back in the Army. I guess even before that, I watched my mom grow up. When I grew up, I watched my mom as a business owner. She was a Mary Kay director. And I learned how to drive in a pink Cadillac.
That's awesome. I didn't know this. That's awesome.
It was fast. It was fun. My dad would drive it, and my dad had like the Sean Connery look going on.
Oh my gosh.
And so my dad is pulling up at a stoplight with this pink Cadillac racing people that he'd beat in a pink Cadillac. Anyway, that was fun. But I got to see her, she was an incredible leader. She was an incredibly successful person, but also everybody loved her because she changed everybody's lives. And so I got to see that impact from the start. I got to see what happens when you have something that you love. I got to see what it looks like to be a business owner that can put your family ahead of your business and still thrive in all areas. And so from the very early age, I saw that and I started little businesses when I was a little kid and all this kind of stuff. And then naturally, that leads into the Army, because the Army is the perfect catalyst for any type of incubator for entrepreneurship. Which is not true at all. Not even a little bit.
Well, and that was the part too when I was talking to you, or we talked a little bit about, and that was the first thing that you said to me, is that you were in the military. And I thought, this is really interesting. How does all of this work together? What is your background as far as military? What did you do in the military? How long were you part of that?
Mm-hmm. I did ROTC in college. I went all in on that because I almost enlisted, and until my mom was crying on the couch in 2007 telling me, please don't do that. So she won. So I did ROTC instead. That was 4 years. And then when I got out, I was an infantry officer and I was active for 6 years. And so even in there, I did my infantry, platoon leader, and some other stuff like that time. But I did a lot of logistical work too. I was running the logistics for our battalion and a couple of those things. So got to see a whole bunch of different things. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of those. But I got to see, we were in Africa doing some really interesting and cool things that helped me see a lot of different perspectives that most of the Army doesn't really see, and seeing something from the other angle, seeing how the Army operates versus how the Department of State thinks, and how by understanding how they think we can operate much more effectively together rather than just trying to kill each other and butt heads all the time. So that carved a really big piece of my perspective and the way that I think about things. So that was a 6-year stint in the Army after that. And then got in the corporate world, got into consulting, mostly because I knew that I wanted to be in business in some way, shape, or form, and I had no idea how the hell to make that happen and what to do. So I thought if I can get into consulting and learn different things and meet people and try different industries, that would lead to something. And it led to real estate, not in any of the ways that I thought it would, but I ended up getting into real estate, did a lot of real estate for a little while, used that to quit my job. Once I quit my job, realized that was my purpose at the time, and I didn't have a purpose in real estate beyond quitting my job, and so I didn't really know what I was doing. So that's where I really got on autopilot and started chasing stuff. Started building, chasing doors, chasing deals, all these things, and really got to a point where I was miserable doing what I was doing, and finally had kind of an awakening moment at an event and realized I didn't want to do it anymore, and had some good pushes from other people. And so I pivoted, didn't know what I wanted to do, experimented a bunch. I, along the way, bought a lawn care company. So I thought that would be fun, and it was not fun, and I hated that too. But then I found the personal development coaching space and realized that is what I had done all along. I did it in the Army, I did it in the corporate world, I did it in real estate. I would always turn around and help the person get to where I was in some way, shape, or form. So that is what led to where I am now. There's been a lot of iterations since then and figuring out what the right way is and how I want to deliver it, but it all, in some way, shape, or form, ties together to lead here.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've been a mentor pretty much your whole life, like a mentor and coach. No matter what you got into, you were able to, like you said, help someone else. And that's what's amazing when you go back and you look at somebody's career path, or you look at kind of where, if you go back, even with mine, like you look far back, I see things way back in my 20s, and now I'm 50, and I'm like, holy cow, like, I can actually pinpoint all through. Yeah. Like, that's been the consistent thread through the whole thing. So That's interesting to me about the fact that you are coaching, but it's not like it's something new. It's just something that you've always done. I
had an awakening moment because when I first got into coach, it was totally by accident. I was on social media talking about the coach that I was working with, and this fellow veteran that I had sold a real estate deal to, he was probably 2 years behind my almost exact journey. He was in banking. He was all of this stuff. And he reached out and he's like, hey, you're talking about coaching. Are you coaching? I said, no, I'm working with someone. He's like, well, will you coach me? I was like, sure, why not? Yeah, let's figure it out. And that all happened by accident. And I started realizing that I enjoyed it. But then I started looking back at like the earliest time that I know that there were probably times before that, just because it's apparently a part of my DNA I have found. But even going back to college, in ROTC, your junior year is the pivotal year to determine what branch you get, if you get the career that you want, or if the Army just tells you to do the thing that they want you to do instead. And I really didn't want that. But we had an incredible professor, or not even professor, but instructor our junior year, that had been in the invasion of Iraq, was the through and through infantryman, leader, all of these things. And so that we got to see that. But then he retired. And so the next class after us had someone that came in that treated it as a vacation from active duty and didn't take it seriously. And so I wanted them to have that benefit because it was such a big deal in their lives, because you don't do well there. And now, instead of being the infantry officer on active duty that you planned for your entire time, you're stuck as a chemical officer in the reserves doing something that you can't stand, having to go find a job in Idaho. And people don't want that. Mm-hmm. And so I led a couple people in our class to start teaching them outside of the normal teaching hours. And it never, none of that ever crossed my mind again. But then when I started getting into the coaching space again, I looked back and I was like, that has been, and little versions of that have always popped up again. And I think but a lot of times we don't ever take the chance to look back and mm-hmm. think about what are the threads or what are the things in the past that we could tap back into, and we just get stuck doing this thing. And when you look back, you see the things that you really were good at and that you enjoyed, but you've got to pay attention to them.
Yeah, and I think specifically with people that do end up coaching or move in that area, there's this, I think there has to be something about you as a human that you want to help other people. Yeah. And it's not something, I think there are some people that try to be a coach because they think because here's the thing about coaching, just because I've been in that space for so long myself, but it's not something you can be taught how to do. I feel like you either have the ability to do it or you don't. You either have the ability to share with other people and coach other people and get them, because it's not about you, it's about them. And that's kind of what you get joy from seeing somebody else succeed.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's all. Because there have been people I've known that have gone in the coaching space and don't do well, and it's because it's more about them being the coach versus seeing the people they're working with like thrive.
Yeah, there was someone that I was just talking to about that and said that this is like, you're not a coach, you're just storytelling. And everyone has a story. It doesn't mean that anybody like, and everybody has something to learn from a story. But if you can't extract those things and you can't also then learn everything about you to try to apply it, you're just talking about yourself.
Right.
And that's not a coach. That's just a...
You have to be willing to listen.
Yeah.
To me, that's like one of the number one things.
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to listen to the things that somebody's telling you to be able to be like, because you'll see something in them that they may not even realize is like special and unique about them, or some gift that they have that they don't even realize exists, and you're able to like pick that out and be like, hey, focus on this because this is where your genius is.
And it's a pattern recognition a lot of times too, because we get so blind to it. And it's why you don't see the thing from back in the day a long time ago until someone holds up a mirror and says like, this is what you've been doing all along, or all of these things are connected, right? But we have blind spots. It's hard to see.
So you have a kinetic coaching, correct? Is that how
Becoming Kinetic is
Becoming Kinetic is your coaching business.
Yeah.
Who right now are you, as far as business owners, like, is it all entrepreneurs or is it corporate? Like, who are you working with primarily right now?
It is 99% business owners. There is business owners plus entrepreneurial-minded people too. So, but the vast majority of it is geared towards business ownership. I think a lot of the principles, and over time it'll change and evolve. Right now that it needs to have a more specific identity. The longer term of what I want to do with it is the principles apply whether you're building your business or you're working in a job. And the principles around how you make decisions, how you make the business, the work that you do, whatever it is that you do to make money, how you make that support your life, it all requires you to be intentional about your life. And so it applies to both. But right now, the primary focus is, there's two segments of it. One is the main community that anybody can go join today. It's a monthly thing. That one is general entrepreneurship. And then we have an elite mastermind group that is more of the Napoleon Hill style, sit down, put someone on the hot seat, allow everybody to come together and support you as a business owner. And that is a deeper and bigger commitment with a smaller group. That one is geared more towards people that have a little bit more experience, people that have been in business a while, people that can talk at a little bit elevated level. So, but it's not just the business. It's the business plus the willingness and the acceptance of the fact that there's other things that are also important in life, not just going all in on business and never looking up.
And that's what I thought was interesting when I was reading more about you and trying to really understand what it is that you do focus not just on the business. It's really about the whole person and how that all fits together. What challenges right now do you feel like that most business owners that you work with face? Is there like one particular challenge or?
It ties to some of the three tips that we were going to talk about too.
Yeah.
But because I think they're very related. One is a lot of business owners, and I mean people that aren't business owners, this still applies to in a lot of ways. But a lot of people that are business owners make decisions that are binary. They look at a situation and an opportunity and they say either this is good, and good means yes, and bad means no. And usually that decision is a matter of, can this be valuable or is this valuable? And there's a lot of things that are valuable. But if that is the only decision-making criteria, we get bogged down in a lot of stuff. And I think the no's are still the no's there. But on the yes side, there's a spectrum. And so the yes could be a 1, it could be a 10, it could be somewhere in between. And a lot of times we don't analyze those accordingly. And so we look at, like I told you about the lawn care company, that was, if I even go back to when I let go of the lawn care company and sold it, as an opportunity to grow a business to make money, yes or no, like that was on the yes side. But if I put that on a scale of 1 to 10 and take into account how it gets me to my long-term goals, how it makes me feel on a daily basis, and how energized I am by it, when I look at the trade-offs that requires versus the rest of the business that I want to run and the transformation that I want to create, that is like maybe a 1 compared to a 10. And so that shouldn't, just because it could be valuable, it doesn't mean that I should do it. It means that it needs to go into a much deeper analysis. I think a lot of times we just skip that analysis and pursue something just because it could be good. And people, I mean, we talked about real estate earlier. People do that with real estate deals where this deal could work, this business could work, this project, like anything could work. Fitness is the same way. Anything can work, and otherwise people wouldn't do it. But that doesn't mean that it's the right thing for you.
Yeah,
So,
and I like what you're saying about all this, because I think that the part where it's that balance of yes, I can do this, but am I going to be happy? Because I feel like that's a big thing. Because a lot of times people think I've got to do this, and it doesn't matter how it affects me, even though I'm going to spend the majority of my time in this. You know, not liking it shouldn't even be considered, because this is going to help me make money.
Yeah.
So and there is a careful balance with it, because even with what I do professionally, I outfit design gyms, and I'm in the fitness arena, and it does what I need it to do. It makes the money. But then I had to find the happiness side of it, because it can be very transactional. I'm very people oriented. So I had to figure out that piece of like, I have to have things in with my job that I'm doing that I actually that I really love. Right. And that's the people part. So interacting in associations, being a part of the community, being a part of multifamily, like those are the things for me that help balance out things. So that's what I feel like you're helping other people do, is that same type of thing. Like it doesn't have to be just this.
Yeah.
Like you can have the other two. Yeah,
because you could have the next opportunity that could make you boatloads of money, but it comes at the expense of all of those things. And so if it's just a matter of, could this thing be good, yes or no, then sure, the answer is yes, and you jump on it. Not realizing the opportunity cost and the trade-off means that you can't go to those associations. You can't do this. You can't do X, Y, or Z things that actually bring you joy. And so in one small sliver, it's a really big net positive, and in every other place, it's a negative. But we get very binary with it, I feel like. At least I know I have.
Well, I mean, and my husband and I talk about this all the time, because like when we've looked at other entrepreneur things like on the side, and it's like, it's usually like we look at it from like the money perspective, like, is this what's going to make the most money? Yeah. You know, that's where we need to, focus. And I'm on the other side, like, but we got to do this other, like, I want to do the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and it's the same thing with how we've evolved with Be Amazing. Like we went from being this fitness focused business to now we're in event space, and we're doing podcasting and all of that. Well, we're now finding a way to make money, and at the same time, we have the joy and the enjoyment. Yeah. Where it wasn't that before. It was mostly the enjoyment, and we weren't making any money. which can happen, hard. Right? Yeah.
Still have to pay bills.
Right. Still have to make all that happen. But so give us those 3 tips. So what are your 3 tips for somebody that is kind of in that space right now? They may have a successful business. They may be starting something new. Like, what 3 tips do you have for us?
So one is on the note that we just described, take into consideration the different. I think this is where values come in to be very important, and not just the kind of rote values of like integrity and all of those things that are kind of table stakes and being a good human. Mm-hmm. The values of things that are really important to you and the non-negotiables that you have. If you can look at decisions and opportunities through that lens, and that sometimes takes a little bit deeper investigation of what your values are and the things that you care about and what your priorities are. But if you can look at opportunities and decisions through a different lens than just the first thing that comes to mind, you start to identify blind spots. And that allows you to make more intentional decisions, allows you to have less buyer's remorse in some cases with different things. So that would be one thing. The second one is, it's tied to another, I would say, common problem, and that is that we often see things as linear, or we look at things in a linear fashion. And I know there's probably a bunch of people that will immediately say, like, I think exponentially, I think about exponential growth, and that's fair, and a lot of us do, but also at the same point, I'll use a weird analogy. I grew up in Minnesota, and there's I-35 in Minnesota that runs all the way south to Dallas. And so a lot of times the way that we look at growth, and we look at, like, if I ask someone their vision, I ask them where they're going to be in 10 years. The way that most people look at it is they're driving down I-35 and they just look as far as that road goes. And so on I-35, there's Des Moines, Iowa, there's Kansas City, and there's Dallas, Texas. There's probably other stuff. I don't know. There's probably some in Oklahoma, but I don't know. But we look at those and we just cast the net out from the direction that we're going, the road that we're on, and we say, what does that look like 10 years down the road? And the difference is, if that's the way that you look at things, then you never end up in Charlotte, because Charlotte isn't one of the options. It's on 35. And instead, if you zoom out and you say, okay, where do I want to be in 10 years? Ignoring the road that I'm on right now, and ignoring the current things that I'm doing, and ignoring the current business, the current trajectory, all of these things that are the norm at the moment. What do I want it to look like in 10 years? And you can replace 10 years, 5 years, 1 year, whatever it is. But when you do that and you zoom out a little bit, you remove the current road and you remove the current options and you create a brand new canvas. And that allows you to decide on things that you want and then find a new way to make them happen, a new way to get there. And I think usually we get so caught up in like when I was in real estate, if you would have asked me my 10-year goal, it was bigger deals and more doors and all of these things. And it would have been exponential growth in real estate, but it would have been in this very narrow lane rather than being where I am right now. And so I think if you can zoom out, it helps to use that as a starting point sometimes. But if people can zoom out and stop just focusing on the natural kind of progression of where they're going and lean into wants, I think that's another really big thing that we can lean into. And then the third one is just asking why. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times we get into, and even if we are very intentional about the road that we go down and the goal that we set for ourselves, if you don't continually check in on why you're doing it, that can change. That goal can change. The thing that you care about the most can change. And that's okay. And that's something that's important to be able to accept. And I think we don't ask that question enough. We get stuck in the rut and the routine of the thing that we're doing. And especially business owners, we get caught up in this kind of echo chamber of our industry and our circle and all of these things where it gets really hard to break out of because we're just doing what everybody else does and what everybody else expects. And if instead you can ask, why am I doing these things? Why do I care about this? Why does this matter? How does this get me to where I want to go? It sometimes gets really uncomfortable, but also it can allow you to pull out of a thing that isn't working for you or may not work for you a couple years down the road or may lead to more misery than where you are right now and put you on a different course. But you've got to ask why. And I think we're afraid to do that a lot of times because it's scary.
This podcast is filmed and produced by Be Amazing Media. At Be Amazing Media, we provide video and photography services. We work with groups, we work with individuals, we work with corporate clients. It doesn't matter if it's headshots, if you're wanting to film a commercial to share your story of your business, or you want to bring us in and film an event. We're here for you. You could reach out to us at beamazing-media.com. Mm-hmm. I think just the three things that you talked about, and I think the zooming out is really big because I think you're right. I think a lot of us do look at like what's in front of us and don't really think about all the other options, not to mention all the other things that can affect that road. And then the second one is the why. I think the why is really important. It's, why do you do the things you do? Because you're right with you just kind of get in like a flow with it, and you just go through your day. Yeah. Don't even think about it anymore. You're just kind of like, well, this is what I do. This is who I am. And not really be open to opportunity to maybe evolve and change. And I know for me, that's been, personally, that's been a thing that I've had to just even turning 50 last year, like even with that, like how I'm allowing myself now to look at things bigger and broader. Mm. And because I was so focused on my identity was so wrapped up in one area, and it was really hard for me to like let go of that and be okay with it. Yeah. And I'm finding now, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like the world is so much bigger. Like I didn't even give time or space to these other things because I was so concerned with how everybody saw me as this one person. Mm-hmm. And I let that put me in a box. And then you feel trapped by four walls that you end up building yourself. Like you build yourself in that. For sure. And then it's like, but to bust out of that and now be like, like I'm so many other things. Like there's so much more for me to do. And there's a bigger world and a bigger impact that I can make if I'm willing to let go of what my identity was, or not to say that that's still not part of my identity. It is. Like fitness is part of my identity. Yeah. But I don't have this same I'm not in the same space with fitness like I was forever. And so that's been for me a really interesting and being able to ask myself why, and why did I stay in that space so long? Like why was I holding on to that? Why was that identity so important? So yeah, ask yourself why, because I think that's a huge thing.
And that, I imagine, like right now, the way that you described it and the way that you like smile and talk about it, obviously there was a huge benefit that came from it. But also when you first started thinking about breaking the singular identity of fitness, I imagine that probably wasn't easy.
Oh no, I probably shed tears over it. I was like, I had, because I was always known as like a fitness coach. I competed in fitness, like I personal trained. I was one of the fitness coaches for the Honeybees, for the Charlotte Hornets for since 2008, and wrapped that up last year. And walking away from that and like having this identity of a fitness coach, and I'm in fitness and I've been a trainer, and used to people always saying, Cel, what about this and what about that? And helped me, with the program and all this, and letting go of that identity, like for me was big, because it was like, oh no, if I let go, does that mean that like I'm no longer in fitness? I'm not relevant anymore? Like, and it's not the case at all. I just am more focused on my own fitness journey than I am like helping somebody else. And people now ask me, when it comes to fitness, it's more about like what I do for a living with outfitting gyms and things like that. But yeah, letting go of that identity, like I cried a lot because I competed. I don't think I told you this. I competed in a Hot Works competition. It was a virtual trainer competition last year, and it was this thing I had on my bucket list. I wanted to be a virtual trainer, and this was kind of that last bit for me of like, okay, if I make this, then I need to stay in it. I need to stay in it, right? Like this is how I'm going to stay. This is how I'm going to make this real. I'm going to stay in it. And then when I didn't get it, I was crushed, because I was like, well, I'm 50. Like, how many more times can you get in a room like that and be, because I was with much younger people. So it was that moment for me where it's like, that door is shutting. So now it's time to let it go and let other doors open. And so it took me probably 3 or 4 months, my husband could tell you. I was so down and just bummed out and sad, so sad. Like I was so sad. And, but now on the other side of it, I can look back and reflect, and I'm like, yeah, I did that at 50 years old. Yeah, I showed up, I did that. But they only got this little sliver of me. They didn't know like everything else about me. Right. So anyway, that's my story with it.
I love it, because I think that is the perfect example, because that happens in everywhere. That happens in all sorts of industries. It happens in the Army when people leave the Army and their entire identity is the Army. It happens in corporate jobs. It happens, hell, in a lot of business owners, your whole identity, like you built this thing that you love. And so if you have to then either delegate it or let go of it or sell it or something like that, like who the hell are you when you let go of it? Identity is, I love the identity conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's because it's just real. Like as people, we, like you said, it's perfect. We identify with, who you work for or who your company is. And then people label you that. Then you become the expert. Yep. Then everything's around that. Well, what if one day you just decide not to do it anymore?
Yeah. And you also have, part of the reason that I started Charlotte Entrepreneurs was, and why I do it the way that I do, is because in real estate in particular, picking on that, I love real estate, but not kind of. I love real estate.
Say it with confidence.
Nope, can't do it. But you go into the rooms and you can apply this anywhere, but you walk in the room and the question is, what do you do? And so as soon as you say that you're a flipper, then the question is, well, how many deals have you done? If you're a wholesaler, how many deals do you do? What's your volume? What type of marketing do you do? All of these different questions and all of these different labels carry a metric to them. And so I can, and the metric is arbitrary, but I know the metric compared to me. And so if I say that I'm a flipper and you're a flipper, and you have done less deals than me, then like I'm up here and you're down here. But if you've done more deals than me and you're up here, I'm like, ooh, I need to listen to you. And it creates this kind of, can I say bullshit?
Yes, you can.
It creates this bullshit hierarchy that is, we immediately bucket someone into the thing that they've done in this like perception of their identity, rather than, and this assumption of value and this assumption of how you can help me versus the reality of the person that you're in front of. And when you can, like, that is a piece of your identity, but it isn't the whole identity.
Oh, and that's what I find too when you talk to people, because my husband and I'll talk about this. Like, I'll be so excited about like people I'm interviewing or rooms I get into, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just sat down with like, the CFO or some title, and then you have a conversation with them, and in that box, that's who that's their expertise and that's what they carry. But there have been a lot of times where I'll be sitting with someone and we start talking about like regular life, and all of a sudden it's not the same. Like we're on the same level. Yeah. Like they may have kids or they may be struggling with like, a lot of times it turns to fitness conversation, or they're struggling with like their fitness routine or things like that. So it is very interesting when you can take that piece away.
Yeah. Because it all is relative too. Even when you describe the person that you're excited to have on the podcast, that means something to you because of your association with that industry. To me, it means very little because I've never heard of that. And so, so this hierarchy and this association with that identity, like we compare ourselves very quickly, but it doesn't actually mean anything. And I mean, we talked about that before when we were starting this, but that's part of the imposter syndrome and part of the challenge, honestly, that I've had over the past year, 2 years, however long it's been now doing this, is especially as I am so excited about building out this elite mastermind. I love it. And we've had the conversations that we've had in this with really high caliber business owners, seeing the relationships come together, seeing them be able to help one another has been like every time I get off of one of the calls that's good, it just like I'm all smiles and I feel great the rest of the day. But I also then going into them, I always have this hesitation because almost all of these guys are further along in business than I am. And so then there's the question of like, oh shit, well, how am I going to help you? I have nothing to add. But that is to the point that you made of the person sitting next to you. If you separate the two, and part of my own association is in the past when I've helped mentor people, it has been a very like business or career oriented. I am ahead of you here. I've done the thing that you are trying to do. And now when I work with these types of people on the business side, I haven't built $1 million business yet. And so I can't help you build the $1 million business. And I want people who either have or have already done that. But I have overcome and worked through and experienced a lot of the personal side and a lot of the mindset things that you as the $1 million business owner haven't, or multi-million-dollar business owner haven't dealt with yet. So in that specific lane, I can help you, and I'm ahead of you sounds bad, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or have more experience than you there. And so just because I'm not more experienced in one area doesn't mean that I can't help you in another. And for me, at least, that's been a really hard thing to separate and not feel like in order to help someone, not only do I have to have already been there, but I have to have been there in every area of life. And that just also doesn't make sense.
No, and that goes back to the whole coaching thing. Sometimes the best coaches are not necessarily the ones that actually played the game.
Yeah.
They know how to coach it. They know how to help somebody get past the mindset, mental blocks and all of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much what it sounds like to me, the type of coach that you are. It really doesn't matter what your personal experience necessarily is in business, because a lot, I think, of what I've gathered from what you do is you help people get past this whole side of like the mental side. And I think you create a space for people to feel safe in. They can help each other, but you're able to help guide the conversations and help kind of really create that in that community.
Yeah, and it ultimately exposes blind spots. I think out of all of it, there's two things that I've found especially from the Army and a couple of different experiences in there. But like what I was mentioning before was seeing the other side of someone else's perspective. I think we have this, like we get blinders on and we think just about the lane that we're in, or we just think about based on our experience. And that might be way over here on one end of the spectrum. The complete opposite is usually what we jump to. We think that if we're not this, so like if I'm not ultra wealthy, then I'm poor. And like there's a large range in between there. And that's a weird example. But like we think in extremes.
It's extremes, yeah. It's like one or the other, hot or cold.
Yeah. And when you can paint the picture a little bit of like here's some of the thoughts along this side and also some of the rationale to why you're never going to end up here. So it is okay to take a little bit of a risk and try something in between. And see the blind spot that you have never opened yourself up to because you are so focused in the thing that you're thinking about right now. It's being able to see the other side of the coin, being able to provide perspective is something that I think people just don't have people that are invested in them enough to understand. And it's really hard. Without that, it's really hard to see it on your own. And I think that is what, the more that I've done it, both in my own business, but also in the groups that I've been a part of, like my life has changed from the people that I've been around that have been able to point out my blind spots and been able to help me see things a little bit differently and help show me that if I back down from one thing that I'm doing, it doesn't mean that I swing all the way to the other side of being a failure. There's other steps, and that has been a game changer.
Well, I think the community that you're creating with Kinetic